You're all wearing glasses. What does that
observation.
Sorry, couldn't resist that.
Okay, we're starting right away. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shona Oladere, and you're welcome to today's episode of Statecraft Inc. Behind the Stage Roundtable Series. Today, we're going to be discussing about war and pandemic, and we're going to be having two sessions. The first is starting right away, and it's themed around risk communication, adopting a human-centered response strategy to health crisis. We have amazing, knowledgeable people on the panel, and I can bet it's going to be a very insightful discussion today. You know, just for us to start off, I'll start with Dr. Alero, Mrs. Alero Aida Otobo. You know, I keep calling her Doctor. Hi, Mrs. Alero. Thank you so much for being here today. Mrs. Alero Aida Otobo is the founder of Incubator Africa and Reformer Arise. Also the co-founder of Project Arc. You can see it on a shed. They've been doing an amazing work in Lagos, and it's been so impactful. Thank you, Mrs. Alero. How are you, ma'am?
I am good, very well. I'm excited, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this.
And I love your shirt. I want to have one.
You love my what? What did you say? You love my what? Thank you. Do you want one?
Sure.
I'll get you one. I'll get you one.
Mind.
Okay, I promise.
You. Thank you. We have Honorable Sheyi Adisa. He is a member of the Oyo State House of Assembly representing Afinjo constituency. Hi, Honorable Adisa. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm well. It's good to be here. Thank you, Shona.
Nice to have you. We also have
my pleasure.
He is popularly known on the street of Twitter as Double F. He is an accountant and economic analyst. How are you, Faye? Nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm well, thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Dr. Chioma Nwakanwa with us. She is popularly known as Dr. Zobo. She is an avid health advocate and also the founder of Smile With Me Foundation. How are you, Dr. Chioma? Nice to have you with us today.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So we're just going to dive right into the discussion. Like I said earlier, we're going to be discussing risk communication, adopting a human-centered response strategy to health crisis. And you know, today coincidentally is World Malaria Day. So every April 25th, it's World Malaria Day, where we get to remind ourselves of malaria and how it's a global commitment for us to beat malaria. But this year, we're more concerned sort of with dealing with the pandemic, coronavirus plaguing the nation. So it's a time discussion we'll be having today, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to gather up recommendations to help to improve, our health system and even, improve the nation by and large. So I'm going to be starting with you, Dr. Alero. I'd like to know, Ms. Alero, I'd like to know you're a frontliner in the development space. You've done, you did a great work in Project Arc, and you've done so many things through Reformers Arise, Incubator Africa. You know so well the importance of collaboration, within in getting things done. I want to know how well have we done as a nation and Africa generally in terms of immersing the power of collaboration between the public, the private, and even citizens as well. I want to know how well have we done
It's a good place to start. Like we all know, the power of collaboration is important in dealing with any issue. And the first place that I'm going to start is to commend Lagos State and even federal government of doing a really good job with ensuring that they took quick, actionable steps, strong steps right at the beginning, right at the onset, to make sure that we contained as much as possible the impact of coronavirus. So the first thing is commendation. Lagos State has been outstanding. They've gotten private sector to get involved. They've gotten the banks to get involved. They've gotten corporate Nigeria, manufacturing, agriculturists. People have gotten very involved, and that's how Project ARC has also played a very significant role. But that said, there's more. And it's the more that I think we need to focus on this morning. And what is the more? Because we put our feet on the ground, we've been out there. I've been to Ikota, members of my team have been to Takwa, we've been to Abuja. There's something that is very, very glaring. When you enter into the slums of Lagos State, the first thing that hits you is that all the information about social distancing, about wearing gloves and putting on your mask, PPE, it's really not applicable to the slums. There is no social distancing that is possible if you live in a place like Ikota, if you live in the slums of Ajegule. You have people, if you've seen the pictures, you have people 10, 12, 14 people living in one room. How do you social distance? And so the thinking that we have to adopt is the solution that we've been pushing a Western solution, or is it an African-driven solution? There's a place for social distancing, but there's a place for more. And that more is going to require collaboration at another level. And what is that collaboration at another level? I would like to use the analogy of nodes. You know, network nodes for computers? You know how you have different nodes, one connected to the other. And if there's any problem with a node, the whole system crashes. To impact coronavirus, COVID-19, we have to activate more nodes than we are currently activating. The government has focused on providing food, addressing hunger, but it is beyond hunger. There's a human face that needs to emerge for attacking coronavirus. And what's that human face? If you look at Maslow laws, you have shelter, you have the health system, you have educational system. You have to adopt a cohesive, integrated approach with a human to the problem that we have. And so government has said, let's feed. But how do you feed people that are homeless? How do you feed people that don't know where they're going to spend the night, don't have any shelter? And these are not just a few 100,000. We are running into millions. And I think we need to pay attention.
Thank you so much.
Last me for a minute. I'm going to close now. We need to put the poor in the center. So if you have a nodal system, we want the poor in the center. Right now, it's the government that is in the center. So what happens if I have a solution? I go to government. If I have banking, I go to government. If I have food, I go to government. So everybody is sort of gravitating towards the government. We need to gravitate towards the poor. And what does that mean, gravitating towards the poor? What are their needs? And we put their needs in the center. And their needs covers not just hunger, not just health, not just education, but shelter, water. All the problems that they are facing in the slums have to be addressed. That is putting the poor in the center. And that's where I'm going to close. Let's flip it. Right now, government is in the center, and we are all assisting government. It's time, but we think we've got the poor, but when you think about it, the poor is not as central as it should be. And that's where I'm going to stop.
Wow, thank you so much. This is very insightful, knowing that rather than gravitating towards the government, it should be, our focus should be towards the poor. And then you sharing about the experience of going to the slum house that, normally in the way these people even live, they don't even practice social distance. They're not even in this time. So thank you so much, Ms. Adero, for that insightful discussion.
Thank you.
I will just move on to Honorable Adisa. You're an insider in government, and I would like to know your perspective about collaboration. What are the challenges, like you being, inside the government, and what do you think are the challenges that, affect the government in collaborating very well with the private sector, or like, what do you think hinders that collaboration, Honorable Adisa?
All right, so thank you once again, Shona. I believe strongly in collaboration. I believe government doesn't have all the answers. What government must do is communicate, collaborate, and show care. At least that's the philosophy I have representing my people. And it's important that government has that approach to solving problems, not acting like we know or we have all the answers, but always looking to collaborate. Now, you asked, does government see the private sector as a threat? I don't think so. I mean, certainly now we're in a pandemic, that should never be the approach. But there's something that happened recently. There was a lab that was trying to get across to government. They had rapid kits and they were trying to get across to government. And it seemed they were meeting roadblocks. And I found that strange considering this is a season of collaboration. But then the more I checked, I saw from the executive, they were a bit resistant because they had some ideas about the private sector. So they had some ideas, for example, some private sector organizations find it as this is the time to get contracts and get big jobs from government. Certainly that's not the approach government wants to take now. Another thing that I noticed from that experience is that, everybody is coming individually. And even in the process of coming individually, so one lab comes, says you have medical rapid kits. Another one comes and says the one that came yesterday, that kit isn't original, use us instead. And then government starts to wonder, okay, how are we going to partner even when the private sector itself is not collaborating? So I mean, this is a real life story that I experienced. And I think that's why we sometimes have things like associations. So for example, if we use medical labs, there's nothing wrong with the association calling all its members and then they collectively go to government with a common position. But when government feels like different people are coming and are saying different things, even against themselves, then I guess it's harder for government to collaborate. Now, I'm not defending government. I'm giving us a real situation. And then obviously the usual things apply, is a different interest in government, and all of that. But on the flip side, the private sector too can easily say they are frustrated with government. And for one, they're not used to the way government does things. In the private sector, if the CEO gives a directive in the morning, it's probably done in the evening. In government, it takes a little longer than that. We go processes and so on and so forth. So I think these are some of the issues that I have observed. Sometimes even within government, there is a disconnect. The message comes from the top and then the people to activate it and not as fast to activate it. And in this situation that I spoke about, the company was already frustrated. They couldn't get across to government, but they called me out on social media. I didn't know about their challenges, but through technology, they sent me a DM and I got involved and they got in touch with governments within 24 hours and, they made their presentations and all of that. So I think particularly in this season, what government needs to do is to be more accessible. We shouldn't leave it in the hands of just, say, the Ministry of Health. You need a task force. You need different people with different expertise coming in to find a solution. This is the season for collaboration more than ever before. No one has all the answers. This is not a time for selfish interests. This is not a time for any of those things. This is a time for us to really make that change. And, one of the things a government official said to me is that I thought people in health are about saving lives. Sometimes it looks like they are more about the money than saving lives. You know, and this is what government is even saying from the private sector. So I think we need to all understand that this is something bigger than all of us, but we can overcome if we put our hands together and work together. And I believe that we need to create the structure and the systems to make that collaboration work now between the private sector and the public sector.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Register. That was really insightful. You know, we have to create a structure to foster that collaboration between both sectors. And even within the private sector, there should be some form of coalition between them in order to make things work. That is very important. I just want to say, for an average Nigerian, there's been so much of concern for the youth. They're scared of losing their job. You know, in the US, there's been like a heavy record of loss of jobs lately. We recently had the crash in the oil price. There's been like recurrent cutting down of the recurrent expenditure in government and all of this. So I want to ask here, looking into the future, what should an average Nigerian expect? Like, what should we prepare for?
Well, thank you. I mean, like you mentioned, you know, this is what people normally call a worst case scenario that everyone tries to pretend like they're preparing for, but nobody really expects it to happen. So what has happened to Nigeria here is like it's like a worst case scenario 1-2 punch, you know, that has really knocked the economy. You know, so you have the pandemic, the virus on one hand, which has a very, very damaging economic effect. And then you have, on the other hand, the oil price crash, which they are linked in a certain way, but you know, they're not completely linked. So for example, if the virus were to somehow disappear today, you know, it doesn't mean that oil prices will just go up to $70 or anything again. You know, it's still, you know, we're looking at a challenge whereby oil prices, the last time we had $100 per barrel was August 2014. Since then, you know, we've never seen that price again. And each time it falls, it never sort of goes back to the level it was before previously. So, you know, I mean, at the time when, in 2015, for example, when this government came in, you know, I think on the first week, oil prices were around $70. We've not seen that anymore. So it will drop down, you know, now that it has dropped down to $20, $30, even if the virus goes away today, maybe it will manage to rise up to $50. But so you still have this long-term ongoing problem. And now, you know, things that were happening that we projected that might happen over, say, the next 5 years, all of a sudden they've happened within a month. You know, so these challenges they're very, very difficult for a country like Nigeria to deal with. And, you know, and because of the way the virus has caught the whole world unawares, completely unawares, nobody really has a solution now. So I think for Western societies, the first thing for them was, look, we have a health system in place, and this health system is there to take care of people, all things being equal. Now we have a situation whereby a virus is sweeping through the population and is making so many people sick. You know, what we want to do is to ensure that we do not collapse the health system and we find a way to manage through it, which is where this whole idea of flattening the curve and lockdowns came from. You know, so basically it was a motivation for people who wanted to protect their health systems, because if 10,000 people are going to die in a normal scenario, if the health system collapses, then that 10,000 can easily become 100,000. You know, so basically you want to minimize the damage you can do by protecting your health system. And then, you know, we came up with this whole ideas of flatten the curve, lockdowns. Now, these ideas have then translated out into developing nations. So a country like Nigeria, which doesn't really have a health system to protect. You know, Nigeria's health system is a whole combination of all kinds of some badly funded government healthcare, then there's the whole bunch of different private sector providers, and then you have probably the majority of population who do not use either, who treat themselves using any kind of thing that they can find, you know. So, but then, you know, what are the options? There are no good options. You know, there's no good option for a country like Nigeria. Lockdown in the Nigerian context is not to protect the health system, but simply to slow down the spread of the disease. You know, and as Mr. Lero said earlier on, you know, when you look at the way people live in the lower income parts of society, you know, the whole concept of social distancing is completely out of the window. You can't use it. So basically what we're trying to do is basically say, okay, if the disease is spreading in, say, Ajegunle, maybe we can contain it to Ajegunle with a lockdown and not allow it spread to other parts of the places. So, you know, we have, so all these things, all these challenges are the fact that we are going forward without actually knowing what is on the other side. You know, nobody has a solution. How do we come out of lockdowns? What are we supposed to do with lockdown? Lockdowns are supposed to, in some societies, lockdown is to buy time to allow them boost up the health system, to allow them get ventilators, get equipment and all that, slow down the spread of disease. But in Nigeria, what is a lockdown? You know, it's not clear. So we have this whole challenges of, you know, dealing with the virus and then dealing with the oil price crash at the same time. And so I think for us, you know, for the future for Nigeria is, you know, the one solution that will maybe help things get back to normal in Nigeria is a treatment. So even a vaccine, if you are very optimistic, you are looking at the vaccine at the end of next year. You know, if you are very optimistic, and that's if it works. You know, vaccines are very, very difficult. You know, less than 10% of them actually, you know, actually make it. So what we are looking for, you know, what will help from a Nigerian point of view is a kind of treatment that helps to say that, okay, even if you catch the virus, you don't die, or it doesn't make you terribly sick. So we can treat people with, you know, I was being a bit hopeful for chloroquine, but it looks like the results from it are not very good. So they're all obviously different. I mean, chloroquine would have been perfect. It's cheap. There's no patent on it. You know, it can be produced very, very, maybe like, I think it costs about maybe 10 cents or something, you know, and it is something that is familiar to Nigeria. So it doesn't need any kind of testing or experiment. Most Nigerians have used it, at least of my age or maybe they're about to use chloroquine growing up, you know. Unfortunately, it looks like it's not, you know, so what we are looking for here is a solution that is a kind of treatment. If we get a treatment, then we can solve one of the two problems that is facing Nigeria, which is that, you know, we don't need to have this whole economically damaging lockdowns that, you know, I mean, people cannot earn money, businesses have to lay off their staff, they can't pay salaries. So it's really, so I think, you know, I mean, unfortunately, there are no easy answers here. So for me, you know, for the oil problem is still is a long-term challenge. It's been going on for a while. Like I mentioned, from 2014, it's been going on, and it'll probably continue that way. So first step is we can hope that if we find a treatment for the virus, then we have only one problem left to deal with, which is the oil challenge. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Faith, for that. You know, you mentioned something when you were saying how that we don't even know how to define lockdown in Nigeria. So I want to ask Dr. Chamba, what is lockdown in Nigeria to you? What's the lockdown like? How do we define lockdown in Nigeria? Are we trying to buy time? Are we trying to get ventilators? Or we're just, you know, following what every other country is doing? What is lockdown in Chamba?
Okay, so I'm glad that, thank you for having me here. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been very enlightening listening to every one of us talk, and it's giving me more grounds, you know, to be able to comment. So about the lockdown, I think I totally agree with Faye. He mentioned the lockdown being different and how it cannot work in Nigeria, and I totally agree. You know, it means different things for different people. I can't certainly say what it is or what it means for Nigerians, but what we have been told it should mean. Reason I'm saying that because Nigeria has an implementation problem. So we say things that we don't act on, you know. So what it should be in Nigeria is a kind of measure to make sure that the spread of the virus is, you know, curbed as much as possible. People should stay at home, you know. But I think I have a challenge with the clauses to that particular lockdown order. for the places where it applies. You have clauses like you can stay home, but then you can go to the market, you know, so and so time. You can stay home, but you know, there are just a lot of buts. And I think because the government was not so strict about, you know, and so strict and plain about what they want, what it means, you know, Nigerians, we are not a set of people that you can just push around, you know. And then when you're not clear about what it is you want, we just we interpret it how we want, and when we live our lives. Maybe for the first week it might work, for the second week it might work, but then following weeks, you know, how will it work? So for me, I think Nigeria should actually look inwards and adopt a method that works for them as Nigeria itself, you know, because I personally have, as a health advocate and someone who is out there, when I get to communicate and interact with people on a daily basis, and I have been able to notice that there are two major factors that will continue to be detrimental to this particular lockdown order that we have. They're in two broad categories. The very first one is illiteracy. The second one is poverty. These are two predominant things in Nigeria: illiteracy and poverty. So you tell people to lock down, stay home. I have a question. How do you tell someone who lives under the bridge to stay home? So which home are you talking about? I'm glad that, I don't know who it was. I think it was Dr. Alero who mentioned I think social determinants like shelter. Yeah, she was the one, shelter, water, and all those things, providing them. If these things are not provided, they are basic. If you don't have them there, you cannot be able to enforce a lockdown, which will help. So you're telling people to stay home. What are they going to eat? Where are they going to stay? These people are poor. In fact, a greater percentage of Nigerians, you know, have to go outside to be able to fend for themselves, for them to be able to make what they can eat. So if I'm a trader and I have to sell my goods and I don't have access to the internet, not just because I wouldn't like to be on the internet, but because I can't afford data, I can't afford a good phone. You know, so you know, we're saying take your business online, take your business online. Let's think about Mama Nkechi, who is a roadside market person. You know, she sells pepper by the roadside. So how are you going to tell her to take her business online? She can't. She has to go out to be able to make sales. So when she's not able to do that, it's going to be really stressful for her for the very first few days. That's if it's not just some hours. And then she just damns it all, pardon my French, and she's like, I'm going out and I'm going to, whatever, if they arrest me, fine. But there are also chances they will not arrest me. And I mean, let's talk about corruption. Nigeria is a very corrupt society, you know. So you have people who are breaching this lockdown. They've been breaching it from day one. You know, for me, I've been working from home, you know, for some days. And I'm someone, I think, you know, my husband will say I take the lockdown very seriously. Like I don't even go out, I don't step outside the door. So I don't even know what happens. So when I hear people say that they are bribing some government officials, security officials, you know, to be able, I mean, as low as 200 naira, you give them and then you pass. You know, some of them don't even collect bribe. They just ask you, how are you? Oh, anything for us, and then you pass. I mean, corruption, you know, is something that has eaten into our fabric so bad that it has become the order of the day. So I think if we want to define lockdown for Nigeria, it should be something our leaders and policymakers should just go back in and find out, this is Nigeria, what works for us? You know, how can these things be able, how can this structure or how can these things be drawn out to be able to suit the country that we live in? So that's what I think.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Dr. Chioma, for that. I'd like Honorable Esther to respond to this. What because like your government, right? Like you're in the government, so do you agree with the perspective that lockdown means nothing in Nigeria? And also like knowing that recently there's been like a rise in human rights abuse. A lot of people want to, you know, get a means to survive, and then yet they get to face issues when they go out. So how did you balance? First of all, do you agree that there is a lockdown? And also, how do you balance the fact that people want to go out and search for survival, and at the same time, you know, being in government, you also want people to stay safe. So what's the balance, and is there a lockdown?
All right, thank you once again. So I said earlier on, these are unprecedented times. I don't believe anybody can say for a fact they know or they have all the answers. In the UK, the Coronavirus Act, the 2020 Act, the law is there, but they have about between A to M, almost 15 exceptions as to when the lockdown doesn't apply. Medical services, food, you know, and even at that, it's not so clear. And I say the UK just to show that it's a global issue. So if we say for a fact that somebody knows in entirety, I'm not sure we do. But I do agree that we need to introspect. We need to look at our situation and make, you know, decisions, policies based on what affects us in Nigeria. You know, Dr. Zobo was talking about literacy in Nigeria, and as we talk about lockdown. So yeah, we have it quite all in place. But again, this is where collaboration comes in. The academia and those that have the hello.
I think it's back now.
Hello.
Okay, we'll come back to Honorable after once the internet is fixed. So, Mrs. Adara, you know, we've been mentioning, like, reading up from your first point about people in the slum not knowing what social distancing is. I want to know, because right now your organization, Project Act, is at the front line trying to meet the needs of the people. So you're even closer to the people than even the government. And I strongly think that your organization like yours have a huge role to play in educating people. What's your perspective about this? How do you think organizations like yours who are, you know, public facing at this time can actually help people to understand social distancing and how to keep safe during this period?
Yeah. Yes, great. Thank you, Shona. As I've been thinking about this question, I think I want to start with what we found extremely funny as we went to the slums and the areas we went to. As soon as we came in, the people in Ikota were saying, please don't bring coronavirus to us. So it meant that they already knew what the pandemic was about. It meant that they were aware that it is something that was being brought in by people who are arriving from the United Kingdom and from the United States. And that as people arrived and came back into Nigeria, that we started having cases of coronavirus. They were that aware. They were not ignorant. And then another joke was, we're not suffering from coronavirus. What we're suffering from is hunger virus.
Are you back?
Hello? Hello?
Okay, Dr.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Okay, yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Hello?
Can you hear me, Shona?
I can hear you, Mrs. O, and I can hear.
Yeah, I can hear everyone.
Doctor, yeah.
Yeah, so I think she's the only one that possibly can't hear us. So, so what I'm going to, the point I'm highlighting is that the people in the low income bracket, they're not as ignorant as we think. Mm-hmm. I think they're actually quite aware of the pandemic and what the issues are.
Since we can hear Honorable Adisa, so we'll just pick up from you, Honorable Adisa. What's your perspective on lockdown? Do you think there is lockdown? So you can respond to your question.
Okay.
All right. Hi, Shona. I think I can hear Dr. Mrs. O, and I can hear everybody. So might be a communication problem with your studio, as it were. But let me just quickly take that question. So, as I said, I don't believe any country has all the answers. I was giving an example of the UK, the Coronavirus Act, has so many exceptions in it as to when people can move around. And I feel for Nigeria, we need to look inward. We need to look at our situation and then create policies. Again, this is where collaboration comes in. We need the researchers. Can you hear me?
Okay, I'll just take a question. Can you hear me now? I want to be sure because I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you. It looks like the problem is from your end. So everyone, I can hear everyone. We could hear each other.
Feyi, I think you should continue speaking.
She was about to ask a question, but I didn't catch the question.
I think it's.
Since you can hear me, so we don't keep people online waiting, right? We'll just take the question. Everybody can hear you, but that's fine. We'll not keep people online waiting. So can we respond to your question? Can we get a response to your question on your website about the lockdown? To answer, once you're done, is there a response to your question? Yeah, thank you.
Right. Okay. Again, as I would like to say, this is a time for collaboration. We need to all work together. We need the researchers giving government information. We need government being accessible. We need the private sector, the labs, helping with kits. We need the, donors and sponsors also coming in. So I think it's a joint task effort that we need at this stage because there are no clear-cut answers. And these are what you call wicked problems. And I believe our state of preparedness, as Feyi said when he was speaking, yes, it was a worst-case scenario, but nobody really thought, as we always do, it will come near us. And that's the problem we're having. A lot of the solutions being proffered now are not, well, they are good, but when you think about the current realities, we don't have infrastructure, we don't have data, we don't have so many things that, restrict our ability to do some of these things we want to do. And those are the major challenges we have. So in terms of lockdown, yes, it cannot be exactly the same way as it is everywhere else. But to a large extent, we need to curb it. We need to flatten the curve. And that's why these are real issues. Now, government is about priorities. Government is about, balancing priorities. The priorities in front of government now is how do we keep people well and stop the spread of coronavirus versus how do we keep people, not hungry or able to feed and survive, because depending on how close you see the virus or how real you feel the virus is, that would determine your actions. Your belief system would determine your actions. So if you feel corona is for foreigners or it's for people coming from London, then you're not going to take it seriously, and hunger is going to become a more dominant interest for you. However, if you feel you're hearing people are dying and you're seeing the gravity or the extent of this issue, then you probably prefer the lockdown. Now, if government has the financial muscle and can get enough resources, then they can try and enforce, social distancing and try and help people. However, if government feels they don't have the resources and cannot raise it, Then they will say people can go around the street, but keep social distancing. So it depends on which side. If you have resources and can manage it, then you can say, stay at home, we'll try and help you. If you feel the other way, we don't have the resources, okay, go about, but keep social distancing. So government is always trying to balance based on what it has in front of it. Now, the other question you asked about harassment and things like that, there is no justification, none whatsoever, for people to harass or you abuse people. Yes, even all over the world, people are saying, what sanctions is, should you name and shame people? That won't work for everybody, certainly not. I'm not even sure if that works really. People say, well, you can speak to them and tell them to go back home, you know? And some people say, no, Nigerians need force. I don't believe that there should ever be a time people should use force, as in harass people to the extent of abuse them or let them lose their human rights. So that is my own position. No justification for harassment or bullying or flogging, as we have seen. Even in some cases, I've heard of death. That should never be the case. But we must find a way to all work together to bring a solution to this problem. And I think our infrastructure, our data, our level of preparedness affects our ability to respond in this trying time.
Oh, great. Thanks so much. Mrs. Adara, so I was asking about what role organizations like yours that are public facing at this time, what role can you play in educating the people? You know, Honorable Adisa is the nail on the wall saying that since we don't have enough, right, to take care of the people, they have to go outside to search for a means of survival. So what role can your organization play and organizations like yours play in terms of educating people to know the risks at this particular point?
Okay, your question is asking about what role our organization can play in communicating the impact of the pandemic to the people, right?
Yes.
Yes. Now,
Yes.
actually, organizations like ours, and there are several, like Project ARC, I think we have a very significant role to play. And I'll tell you why. Anyone who brings good news to someone is going to be well received and well accepted. So the fact that you're bringing food, you're bringing sanitary items like soap and disinfectant, they see you as a friend coming to help. Because of that understanding and that favor you are enjoying, it gives you access to the people that need to understand what coronavirus is about and the precautions they need to take. So organizations like us, we are well positioned to actually teach, share, and encourage the poor to behave properly and to take the right steps to ensure that this pandemic, at the quickest possible time possible, we're able to flatten the curve. So we do have a big role to play. So we're not just about feeding. We also teach, like I said, we also tell them about social distancing. But my challenge is, how do you social distance in a situation where you have nowhere to go and you have no choice but to live like sardines in a tin? That is the challenge. So you can talk, but the reality is there's no water. So how do you wash your hands? You can talk. The challenge is there's no light. There's no toilets. So everybody does their business outside. So how do you enforce all these measures that are supposed to curtail and contain the virus when the reality is it's not possible? So we have to go back to the drawing table, and we have to all come together. I like what Honorable Adisa keeps emphasizing. He mentioned the word system. We need a system, we need a framework that brings all key actors onto the table, that will create these nodes that will activate transformation. And we, Project ARC, and other organizations like Lekki Food Bank, all other organizations, we have a role to handhold those who are less privileged and help them go on the journey that we know they have to go on. And that journey will involve health, will involve teaching them about PPE and being careful and taking the right steps, taking the right precaution, and also providing shelter. I don't know whether you've seen this video of one of the survivors, Ayamba. I'll mention her name because it went viral. Ayamba Dapinone. She raised several pertinent issues. She gave suggestions like, how can we involve the hotels? How can we involve restaurants? Restaurants right now some of them, kitchens are empty. They can cook for the individuals, for the masses, for the communities in their area. Hotels can shelter, hotel rooms can shelter individuals that are homeless. It's almost as if it's time to redefine the new normal. There's a heart of compassion that Nigerians have. Let's use that heart of compassion to solve our problem. And it goes beyond health. It requires that we put on a human face that we can respond to and that understands the issues at hand. So let's start redefining. Let's start restructuring. Let's begin to build a new template that the rest of the world can look at us and say, that's the way to go if you are an African nation on the African continent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Valera. That was a great point. You know, even in France at the moment, most of the hotels, they're making use of the hotels to shelter people that are exposed to gender and domestic violence at this point. So I think we need to explore all options. That's one of the points that I think is, you know, you emphasize, which is we need to put this into practice. So, Dr. Chioma, I would like to know, looking beyond the COVID-19, what are the changes? What changes do you think we need to implement within the health sector? What are the changes we need to implement, Dr. Chioma?
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm grateful that we're looking beyond COVID-19 because as Dr. Valera said, we're about to redefine what our new normal is. The world as we know it is about, in fact, it has changed. And, you know, I told someone the other day that even if they say today COVID-19 is eradicated, it doesn't exist anymore. I don't think people will be that keen to go around hugging people as they used to, shaking hands as they used to. I mean, people are just going to learn to be on their own, you know. So for people like me who just like staying on their own, I think that's a plus for me for COVID-19. So the major challenges, you know, are very obvious. So I think we have a lot to do with revisiting our health policies and finding what works for us post-COVID. Okay, I think the very first thing is I'm someone who has greatly advocated for health insurance and health financing, you know, because I was at a conference early last year, and it was on preventing epidemics. That was for Nigeria Health Watch. And we were talking about providing funding, you know, to prepare for epidemics. I said something striking, and, you know, it features in everyday life. You don't prepare for battle in battle. Now, nobody is looking to have COVID-19. Nobody was expecting it, as the Honorable said. So I think the challenge with Nigeria is one major problem, aside poverty, illiteracy. The next thing is religion. We just have this mindset of, it's not my portion. It will never happen to me. No, it's not my portion. And I think that's the leading cause of death in Africa for me, because we just want to keep living in denial and we expect things to just happen, you know, for us. You know, things will happen. We call it faith. We call it hope. We just give it different nicknames. But seriously, we need to learn how to form a structure and work. Find out, what did we do wrong? That's the very first thing. Evaluation, post-COVID evaluation. What happened during this time? What did we do good? What did we do wrong? And how can we make it better? You know, so the very first thing is health insurance. Poverty, people cannot afford health care on a normal day. And then we keep hearing that people who already have underlying health conditions they have a worse effect, you know, when it comes to COVID-19, people who already have these issues. So if someone is, and we know that most Nigerians are unhealthy, let's be realistic. Some of them know it, some of them don't know it. So I think the very first thing we should work on is revisiting our health insurance policies. How do we make healthcare accessible to people? You know, we just have about 2% of Nigerians who are covered by the insurance. That is very poor. It is very poor. So we should revisit our health insurance. Then primary healthcare restructuring. You know, when we keep hearing that, oh, Nigerian doctors are leaving every day, Nigerian healthcare workers are leaving every day. Now let's use the UK for example. So when they leave to the UK, where are they working? They are working in the primary healthcare settings in the UK, NHS and all that. They are working in their primary healthcare settings. Then think about the average primary healthcare center in your community. Just take a moment to think about what your primary healthcare center looks like in your local community. I don't think, you know, it's somewhere you would want to go. I mean, you know, I had one of our lecturers say then to some of our classmates when we were in school, he would say, you know, some of you don't want to take this medicine of a thing very seriously. And I'm marking all of you. So whenever I am sick in this life and they carry me to the hospital, even if I am dead, I will stand up from the bed and run out once I see it's your hospital. Now that's a joke that he cracks, but then there are some primary healthcare centers in our communities that if they take you to, you just say, let me just stay at home and believe God for healing. Now we need to revisit our primary healthcare centers. We need to restructure them. We need to, is a first point of call. It's what is in our communities. That's where people who are not so buoyant are going to go to. Even ideally, if it is equipped, everyone should go there. There's a referral system in medicine from the primary healthcare center to the secondary before the tertiary. But then we see that the tertiary healthcare centers in Nigeria, they are overworked. That's why you see Luth is running out of bed spaces. Every day people are on the news. They say Lasuth is running, this one is running. They just keep dragging different hospitals. But it's not the hospital's problem. I don't really think it's about the hospital. It's about the government at the end of the day. So we should look for ways of, you know, restructuring the primary healthcare centers. Then worker compensation. We have, I don't know how to put it. So our workers are below capacity, you know, both in training. There are different reasons why people are leaving. People are leaving because they have poor remuneration. People are leaving because they are not seeing an advancement in their career. People want to grow in their career. They want to be in a workspace that helps them to grow. So if you provide that for your workers, if you pay them timely, you know, and then you pay them well. Look at us dragging for hazard fees, for Christ's sake, 5K hazard fee. That is unheard of, you know. So I think these ones, then the next thing is the political will. You know, if you are in an environment where there's a lack of political will, there's little you can do, especially the Honorable was talking about private and public sector collaboration. You know, private and public sector collaboration cannot work if the government and those in power are not willing to make it work. So I think the lack of political will should be revisited and it should be changed. There should be will, people should be willing, you know. Then social determinants. You can't do much if there's no water, there's no light, there's no electricity, you know. So you should find out what are those things that are basic needs that everybody needs: shelter, food, light, water, you know, good road networks. If people have an emergency in Nigeria, people can actually die on the road trying to get to the hospitals. So I think it's important for us to visit that. Then the next thing which concerns me would be, I think Nigeria needs to revisit her health communication campaign design. So, sorry, I didn't hear you. So I was. Okay. Oh, sure. So I'm just making the last point anyway. So I'm just saying that we need to revisit our health communications campaign, you know, platform and all that, and know how to look inwards and make communication that is tailored to the people that we are reaching out to. We don't just drop information for people and expect that they will run with it. So communication to people has to be simple, it has to be memorable, it has to be easily understood, and it has to be culturally appropriate, and it should be something that is meaningful to your audience. So if these factors are not, you know, included, then you are talking to the wrong people. Tailor your message to Nigeria. Don't just get something from outside the country and dump on us. Thank you very much.
Okay, because your last point actually answers a question we had on, like, from what appears to be more information as to impending doom of the virus and not a lot of information on how best to keep one immunity. So I'd like for you to respond to that. How can we create a balance? He's saying that there is so much of information about impending doom, like the oil, the coronavirus escalating and all of that, and then little about how one can keep safe. So, Faye, how do you think we can balance this so it's not like we're emphasizing doom over, keeping safe?
Okay, I think it's a good point but what I'll add is that for government to inform people, they themselves must be informed. So this is, again, it's a fast moving situation. Things are changing quite rapidly. So, for example, I think it was yesterday or a couple of days ago, the Chinese CDC, the Center for Disease Control, they released a very interesting research report that showed how the disease spread in one of China's biggest cities, Guangzhou. So and what they found was that somebody came from Wuhan, which was the epicenter of where it broke. This person went with a couple of their family members to a restaurant, and then there were two other families in that restaurant having a meal. And while they were having that meal, everyone who was sitting in the line of the air conditioning got the disease. So everyone who caught it, just from that one person, they caught it from that. By the time they did all their contract tracing and then they found out that it was that one person in that restaurant, about 10 people caught it. So what we are seeing from this virus is that in some settings, the spread...
Dr. Chioma has to leave. We just wanted to say thank you so much, Dr. Chioma, for joining us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, you can go on. Thank you.
Yeah, right. So a research report like that is quite interesting for a country like Nigeria. So what it is telling us is that in some settings, the disease spreads quicker and faster than in some other settings. So what we are finding now is that it's some emerging research is showing that outdoors where the weather is warm, it doesn't spread that quickly. Now, what they found, just going back to that restaurant I was talking about, is that the restaurant had no ventilation. There were no windows. So it was air conditioned and everyone in there. So we're looking at a situation where if we extrapolate that, we'll be looking at more research coming out, and maybe other people will also confirm that research. So we might see a situation whereby indoors, air conditioned, where there's no ventilation, is the kind of thing that we need to lock down. So any kind of gathering in public where people are in a closed space, we might need to lock that down. But for outdoor things, so maybe we don't need to stop the ordinary woman who is selling her stuff by the roadside. We don't need to stop her from doing that. So what is emerging? So I think that Nigerian policymakers and all the people who are fighting, who are at the front line of this battle, before they can actually inform, because what has happened throughout this crisis is you've seen it across the world, and this is not even a Nigerian problem. Across the world, we've seen official misinformation. So if you go back 6 weeks ago, for example, people were saying, "Oh, you don't need to wear masks. Masks don't do anything." All of a sudden now, masks are quite important, because now we see that as it is something that cannot make the situation worse. If I wear a mask and you wear a mask, then even if one of us has it, then the chances of spreading it are very low. So that information on masks today is not what it was, say, 6 weeks ago. Same thing with something like ventilators. Ventilators, everyone, in early March, everyone thought that ventilators were the game changer and everyone was rushing to buy them. But now we're now seeing that actually ventilators might be doing more damage to people. So again, the situation is, so I think for Nigeria, especially given our education levels, our policymakers will need to spend a considerable amount of time informing themselves, just so that they are sure that by the time they go to the public with a message, it's not a message that they will then need to go back on in a few weeks' time, or change. So we're looking at, so I mean, there's a lot of information coming out from there. Like I mentioned, we have this new research showing that actually, maybe we don't need to lock down everything. Maybe things that happen outside, maybe they are okay. Maybe we don't need to ban them, but things that happen indoors, like religious gatherings. Another thing, another piece of research that came out a few ago, that the virus needs to be projected, in terms of it needs to be propelled, if you like. So if you're in a place where there's a lot of singing, where there's a lot of shouting, there's a lot of talking, that kind of thing will aid it. So now you're now looking at a combination of, if people are singing in a closed space, then that is dangerous. Then the virus will spread quite a lot there. So that's looking like churches, that's looking like mosques, that's looking like any kind of, maybe even concerts indoors. So we need to then look at the way how we move forward, whereby, okay, what do we say stop for now until we find a treatment? Because we cannot continue like this. So I think it's key for our policymakers to, as much as they are trying to fight this battle and as much as they are under so much pressure, trying to do so many different things at the same time, they should also make some time to ensure that they are keeping themselves updated with the latest information that is coming out, because everything is coming out together and it's building, it's small pieces, but it's building a gradual picture as people are understanding the virus. And for a country like Nigeria, it is vital, it's very important, because if we give one information today, and then we now go back and give a different information tomorrow, we are potentially costing people's lives, because we're going to create confusion, and then people might not be able to understand how they should go back from what they were told earlier.
Thanks a lot, Faye. Thanks a lot. We have to wrap up now, but I would just like Honorable Rabisa and Ms. Zalera to just weigh in on this. What do you think people can do to improve their mental health and boost their immunity? Like in 1 minute, what's that one thing that you recommend for Nigerians? What can they do to boost their immunity and also, help their mental health? Ms. Zalera.
Can you just repeat that again, Shauna? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you just repeat it?
What can people do in this season to boost their immunity and also help their mental health?
Mental health. I heard the last one. Okay. And boost. Okay, to boost immunity. I'm going to say very quickly, one, to boost your immunity, you need to take a lot of fruits and vegetables. And we are blessed in Nigeria. Fruits grow in our backyard. Fruits are accessible. So lots of fruits, lots of vegetables. And if you actually have coronavirus, and I know a few people that have had it, they've actually boosted their immunity by taking a lot of fruits and vegetables. And there are concoctions that ginger, turmeric, etc., that you're advised to take. So boosting one's immunity is easy. It's not difficult. It's to eat as much fresh food as possible, salads, fruits, and veg. Now, mental health, and I think this is where we need to pay some attention. My heart goes out to a lot of people who right now are living alone, and quite a number of our young people are doing that. People who are homeless, living under the bridge and in very difficult situations. I think it is important now more than ever to stay connected. The key is to stay connected, and technology helps us to stay connected. So use technology to stay connected to family, to friends. Use technology to make sure that you are constantly in dialogue. And if you don't have access to technology, this is the time to make sure that you know your neighbor. And I've seen a lot happen in other parts of the world. You've seen the videos where people are singing and shouting out to one another. So there are things that you can do, but the key is stay connected. But I'd like to say something very quickly because you've given me a minute to talk. What Faye has mentioned about the future and where we are going, I think it is so important to recognize that, honestly, the world is not going to be the same. And it's important that we start understanding what that world will look like and the role we play and the role we will be playing in that world. If we don't think carefully now, using this time of lockdown to think, to understand what is going on, we will struggle when coronavirus is over. And I will close by saying I watched a video of released, I think in the last 24 hours, where it is clear now that the coronavirus does not do well in the heat. And I think that explains why we have not had as many deaths. And it's now confirmed. It actually dies very quickly in the heat. So what Feyi was saying about being contained, no ventilation, air conditioning, you are actually creating the conditions that makes the virus spread. So if you're outside in the heat with our humidity, these chances of spreading drop to like 1.5%. So there's information, valuable information out there that is saying we can change the narrative and we can change what we are doing right now. And I'm sure government will see that video and will respond. Thank you very much, and I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot, Mrs. Alera. Honorable Addison, what are your tips for us? How can we boost our immunity, our mental health? What are you doing? How can we learn from you?
All right, so thank you once again. I think Mrs. Zo has really said it. I think, yes, fruits, taking vitamin C, fresh fruits, very important. In terms of mental health, I think it's key. We don't spread fear. I think it's key that we, are well informed and we say the right things. We should also encourage ourselves by seeing those that have overcome it. Yes, it can lead to death, but we must sort of come with also a mindset that, we can overcome it. Not to say one should be careless or one should be, reckless. We also have the right framework, because a lot of the fear is killing people even before it gets to them. And that's why we must ensure that we are spreading the right messages. And on that note, I want to thank organizations like Project ARC for what they are doing. If you look very closely at the rural communities, the towns and the villages, as you like, where we have a lot of our people, you need to realize that we need organizations like that to continue to help in the advocacy, in the orientation, and even bringing support to people. Collaboration is the name of this game. We've left just representative government to participatory government. We need to get every hand on deck to solve this crisis. It's not, when we keep saying government, we are the government. Yes, some people are at the forefront, but we are. If we look at America, when we talk, President Trump would talk about Roche and all these private companies and the research they are doing. That's collaboration. If we're talking government should do research, government should do this, yes, government will do it, but there are some people that may do it better. And that's why they must engage. They mustn't sit at the back end, just decide to leverage and come out and speak to government. Thank God technology makes it a lot easier. So please, on this, my final note, please let's collaborate, let's work with government. They don't have all the answers, and that's the honest truth. And I'm sure, at least from my point of view, a lot of officials are willing to listen and partner with people. Research, organizations like Project ARC, and so on and so forth. Rural communities are lucky in the sense that, number one, they do a lot of also help them, but they need to understand the extent or the gravity of this pandemic we're facing.
Oh, okay. So sorry you could not hear me. Yeah, I was saying thank you so much, Honorable Adisa, for that. That was really insightful. I want us to end this on a very good note. With Feyi responding to, lately there's been a lot of discussion about cancellation of Africa's debt, and Africa owes quite a lot. And then from the debt we owe, China accounts for over 70% of Africa's debt, So there's been a lot of discussion within the ECOWAS, the Niger president, the chairman of the ECOWAS, saying how that, people should cancel, the nation should cancel Africa's debt. So what do you think? If this happens, I hope it does, what do you think? What would this mean for, an average Nigerian? What should we expect that? What's your perspective, just in one word as we round up?
Okay, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think the first thing to realize is that, debt cancellation is something that we always need every few years. So, I mean, if you go back to President Obasanjo's first term, for example, 1999 to 2003, he really didn't do anything beyond chasing around debt cancellation. He eventually got it, and, that debt cancellation freed up a lot of government spending. So when he initially, in the beginning, when he came in, more than half of the government's revenues were going into debt servicing. So he spent all his whole first term running after creditors, and eventually he got the debt cancellation. So, even virus, and there was no virus at that time. So virus or no virus, we were going to need debt cancellation or debt, moratorium or something in the near future, because we've run up quite a significant amount of debt in the last few years. So, the virus presents an opportunity to, like I mentioned earlier, things that were going to happen over 5 years are probably now happening within a much shorter time of 6 months. So now, I would say, hey, take the opportunity. Right now, the general consensus that this is damaging African economy. So I think this is the best time to just throw everything out there, and try and get as much as you can, because we were already in an unsustainable situation without the virus. The budget for this year is unbelievable, that the amount of deficit in the budget is actually more than the revenues. I mean, you're earning 1,000 naira a month in salary, and to actually meet up with your expenses and commitments, you then need to borrow an extra 2,000 naira a month. So it's completely ridiculous and unsustainable. So this is a good time to reset. So first of all, the fuel subsidy situation has hopefully been dealt with. I hope it doesn't come back if oil prices rise again. So that's one, but then there's also the fact that everything that the government is earning, every single thing cannot even pay the debt, cannot even service the debt. So I think there's an opportunity for, throw everything out there. The government should ask, they should not be shy to ask for anything. There's some things that might be difficult to ask. So for example, a lot of the debt from China is for infrastructure. Some of the infrastructure has not even been finished. So if you are asking China for debt cancellation or debt relief now, for example, do you want them to stop the Lagos Ibadan railway? I mean, you don't really want that. So that kind of debt might be difficult to ask for. But there are other debts that we can really ask for. That the Nigeria is owing the World Bank and all these kind of people. Some of the Euro bond holders, maybe there might be options that I don't think there are. But so ask for as much as you can. Is to buy breathing room. For the government, because we're getting to the point whereby the government was simply existing to collect revenues from oil and use it to service debt and not be able to do anything else. So this is an opportunity for something that might have happened in 2025, to happen in 2020. So we should go for it and ask for, and not be shy, ask for as much as possible, and let's see what is possible.
Oh, great. Thanks a lot. It's been an insightful discussion. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Mrs. O. Thank you, Honorable Dr. Chioma. And one thing that anyone who listened to the discussion, there was so much of optimism about what Nigeria can be in the nearest and in the coming months. And I think that is very important. It's important we have this kind of conversation. And then thanks a lot for joining us, everyone. And thanks for everyone in the panel. We're having another discussion at 1 o'clock, and there we'll be discussing decade of action, innovative solutions to scale prevention of epidemics and access to treatment with Dr. Ola Brown, Mr. Ola Olu, and Dr. Bobby. So thank you so much for your time, Mr. Faye, Mrs. Ottawa, and Honorable Badista. It was really, really, really insightful. Thank you, and thanks for everyone joining us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye. Thanks.